And thank you for joining us for this final session of our conference. My name is Jacqueline Barber. I'm one of the co-organizers of this meeting. The goal for our last session is to look at some of the underlying issues of gender and ideology, identity, and self-image that really, I think, produce the sorts of problems we've been talking about for the last 12 hours or so. We have talked a lot in the previous two sessions about justice, about the lack of justice, about the quest for justice, and about the difficulty of achieving it. We've also talked a lot about innovation, and we've had, I think the last panel was very interesting discussion about some of the ideas that have been tried, some of the good practices that are out there, and some of the strategies that people are trying to adopt to move from where we are now to where we want to be. The goal of this session is to really focus on, if you like, a younger age cohort than we have so far. We're looking at children and adolescents, and we're looking primarily at school, though not exclusively at school. And we're trying to address some of the key questions about prevention. Prevention, I think, for many of us is the overarching goal here. As one of the previous speakers said, if we could prevent gender-based violence, that would be much better than having good mechanisms for addressing it after the fact. But how do we do prevention? How do we institutionalize ways of educating and bringing up children in a world which is so divided and so beset with gender hierarchy? And that's not an easy question. So I think we have a very good set of panelists here going to help us with this. And the way we're planning to organize this panel is as follows. Each panelist is going to speak quite briefly. They're going to just describe a little bit about the work they've done and the ideas they have for prevention and for gender-based education. And then we're going to have a discussion within the panel to start with. I'm going to sort of ask some leading questions and try to tease out some of the ideas, and then we're going to open to the floor. And we're aiming to finish in an hour at 3:45, which is a little bit later than the program said, but we definitely don't want to stretch beyond that. And as we have this final session, we'd also like all of you to be thinking about next steps, about what you think usefully could come out of this meeting that we've had, what ideas you might have, and what time and other contributions you might be willing to make, so that we can really build on some of the insights that we've shared. So let me start by introducing our first speaker, who is sitting to my right, Dr. Jaya, who is a physician by training and has both an MD but also an academic background in public health. And she's an expert on issues to do with adolescent health. And she is now working as a program officer at UNFPA, the UN agency that deals with population. So, Dr. Jaya, thank you for joining us.
I'll actually use the PowerPoint, and I'll just go there just for the ease of changing slides. And I think what I want to share is from our events on the adolescent education program that we implement with NCRT education. And I think it's extremely relevant to the prevention discourse that we are trying to...
Jaya, we can't hear you, so just thank you.
So we're talking about 240 million people in the age group of 10 to 19 in the country. And school enrollment, especially after the enactment of the right to education, is high and is going to increase steadily. Hence, schools are a very important forum for reaching out to young people in any meaningful way. If we look at what the survey data says, majority of young people express that they perceived sex education, which is often known as family life education in India, to be extremely important. But only 15% reported that they had actually received any formal sex education. And also 45% boys and 27% girls voted for teacher as one of the most popular person to transact this education with them. So once more, the importance of education and the school system. So in this context, the Adolescence Education Program works towards empowering young people with accurate age-appropriate information that enables them to respond to real-life situations in positive and responsible ways. The key guiding principles of the program recognize young people as a positive and valuable resource, and very importantly, builds on the transformational potential of education. And this is where I feel the gender discourse is very relevant, because we want to enable young people not just to accept the way things are, but to learn to challenge them. And that the program should be participatory, process-oriented, and non-judgmental, and should enable young people to actually understand and negotiate their existing realities, which are constantly changing in today's world. The themes that the program deals with are understanding changes during adolescence and being comfortable with them, establishing and maintaining positive and responsible relationships, understanding and challenging stereotypes and discrimination related to gender and sexuality, understanding and reporting abuse and violation, prevention of HIV/AIDS, and prevention of substance misuse. The program mandates 23 hours of classroom transaction, and in that, about 25% is actually devoted to gender issues. So gender is very strongly already anchored in the program, and of course, it can be further strengthened. Just to give us a sense of what is it that we're talking across the country when we talk about adolescence education. One, the program is not mandatory in school education, as I think the previous panel had already pointed out. But we have the adolescence education, NCRT, the National Council of Educational Research and Training, coordinates and monitors 2 large programs. The adolescence education under the National Population Education Project, which is implemented in 30 states and union territories, and at the national level with 3 school systems. Some of you who are familiar, the private schools affiliated to Central Board of Secondary Education, the Kendriya Vidyalayas, and the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya. Also the open school. The second strand is where UNFPA partners with NCRT in implementing the program. Then NACO took the lead essentially for HIV prevention almost a decade ago to implement the program in state boards of education. But even that program has graduated from being only a HIV prevention program to a more holistic program. And of course, we have several stellar programs by NGOs that work either independently or in partnership with the state boards of education. Several of you may know that the adolescence education program was banned after 2005 in selected states. And some of our curricula were reduced to abstinence only. That is all that we were allowed to talk about. And I think we've recovered some strategic ground. We do not call it sex education. We've benefited from positioning adolescence education in the much wider context of enabling young people to reach their potential, to enable the country to realize its demographic dividend. While some of us may find that a very instrumentalist approach, it has helped us keep the program in place and make incremental progress. What also helped was sustained multi-stakeholder analysis and working together. When the program was banned, I think several constituencies came together. And we also worked on cultural relevance of adolescence education, because what we heard from the critics of the program was that the program actually does not fit in the cultural ethos of this country. And we had to bring it back in on why is it relevant. Also, to be aware of what is the window of opportunity to bring in programs of this kind. For example, the incident of December 16th, or the Justice Verma Committee report. Similarly for us, within the education framework, the National Curriculum Framework 2005, that actually recommends participatory methodologies and recommends building on learners' experiences, was a very strong support to bring about changes in the curriculum. We also got in buy-in from the senior policymakers in the MHRD. There was leadership from NCRT as well as from the SCRT. And then continuous engagement of several stakeholders, the schooling systems, the civil society, as well as independent experts, help us redo the conceptual framework of the program, the guiding principles, and also develop a curriculum that integrates reproductive and sexual health issues across all stages of schooling. I think several of us said that we need to start this education, it starts at birth. But within the school, there is a systematic curriculum across all stages of schooling. And I think a very valuable learning for us has been that while we keep the larger vision in place, we do not lose sight of that. We need to aim for steady, sustainable, and incremental progress, which is in partnership with the system, rather than find quick solutions which do not have buyers later within the system. So for example, if I give you the example of the AAP material, the resource material which is used for master trainers and nodal teachers, as I said, we were only an abstinence-only curriculum. From there, in my understanding, we've made substantial progress. We have comprehensive discussion on genital hygiene, nocturnal emission. The concept of sexuality is well explained. The need to understand and challenge discrimination is underscored. The issue of gender-based violence is dealt with in sufficient detail so that the issues of sex selection, child marriage, unintended pregnancy are all discussed. There's also an activity of question box where young people can drop in their queries related to sensitive issues which they are hesitant to ask in public. And those could be dealt with anonymously and could then provide evidence for, further subsequent revisions. But of course, when you do something of this kind, if you look at the international guidelines on sexuality education, we are still missing a comprehensive discussion on masturbation, on sexual diversity, and information on unintended pregnancy and contraception is still limited to the married context. In terms of developing materials, and I think we all talked about how important it is to bring about change in mindsets, what helped us was to demonstrate the value that you actually improve the curriculum when you bring in participatory methodologies and not dilute the content, because that was the teacher's worry, that if the curriculum is too participatory, we won't have sufficient time to deal with everything. And exposure to varied opinions, so that it's not only the curriculum committee members who sit together and develop the curriculum. They have the opportunity to hear from others, and particularly young people. And the other thing we found of great value is process-driven approaches. One-time contact with teachers or the system will not give us the results that we want to see. So I'll not go through so for example, this was in order to discuss sex selection, this was a news excerpt that was brought in. And the idea is to expose the learner to different information and to enable them to deduce the learning through structured discussion without being judgmental. In terms of capacity building, particularly for the school education, I think we need to approach both the pre-service teacher training as well as in-service training. And we need to create a critical mass of functionaries, not only have the senior policymakers sensitized and the teachers trained, but the mid-level people who actually monitor the implementation of the program. Their sensitization and orientation is extremely important. In our program, we had external experts come about and first train the nodal teachers. And we have systematically changed that to having school system specific master trainers who stay as a resource that can continuously train the teachers. One-time training will not do the trick. And we recognize that it's not possible to do face-to-face training. So we are now exploring possibilities of web-based distance learning opportunities, which can play an important role. And very importantly, we need teachers, because most of our teaching learning, particularly in schools, is didactic. What we need is that when we bring in teachers rather than content, we focus more on facilitation techniques and how can they use participatory methodologies in the classroom. And also that along the way, we may need to change our strategies. We were a pan-country program, and we were training 2 teachers in every school, which seemed highly insufficient to bring about any change in the school environment. So the program was consolidated to 5 states, and we increased the number of teachers trained, just to improve the program impact and quality. And that, we all say that, but in order to have a program that responds to young people's needs, we need them to be part of the program design and implementation. And AEP is still not mandatory, and I think one of the reasons is that people think that it's not so important. It's important to do well in math and social science and science because it has a better career opportunity at the end, but not so much. So I think what we need to demonstrate is the connect between A child who can critically think is not only for adolescence education, but will also be able to apply those skills to doing better at math or science or social science. And somebody who's more centered, has better relationships with both peers and teachers, will be able to focus better and will do better scholastically also. And it's true that education system, like every other system, is overloaded. So what we need to tell teachers and principals is that they need to make better use of existing spaces within the school. So the school assembly, the socially useful productive periods, the parent-teacher association meetings, all of these are opportunities where similar messages can be reinforced. And even within a classroom, so just, this was a grammar lesson where the learner is supposed to learn verbs, the use of verb. And they were trying to do it through a schedule. So the schedule was Nina went to school, prepared lunchbox for father, and so on. And we just changed the schedule. And it actually challenges gender stereotypes. So we start with music, people doing yoga, the father helping at home, the mother doing something that is valued. So just slight change in the curriculum can actually have a lot of impact in the discussion in the classroom and challenge stereotypes without actually calling it a gender class. Monitoring and evaluation is an extremely important part of any well-run program. So having well-defined criteria, both for monitoring as well as for recognizing performance is important. Also, this also came up previously that we need budgets for assessments, not only at end line, but at baseline and during the program also. We also felt, we evaluated the program and we felt that we do not have sufficient instruments or indicators that measure non-health outcomes. So we have indicators for health outcomes. So pregnancy averted or anemia. So we have those, but we do not know how to measure agency or mobility or empowerment. I mean, there are instruments, but they need to be fine-tuned more for the younger audience of school-going age to be able to do justice to the kind of programs that we are implementing. We undertook an assessment and in which about 20,000 young people participated across 200 schools. And people do find, the students, teachers, and principals find the intervention meaningful. They reported better decision-making, better communication skills. Also, more than 3/4 of adolescents reported positive attitudes on challenging gender stereotypes, and girls are at the leading edge of challenging some of these stereotypes. The teachers reported that they had better relationship with their students now that they understood them better, and that they were using the participatory methodologies even in their regular classroom teaching. But we also recognize that a 16-hour curriculum needs to be implemented much better and far more sincerely if we have to weed out, some very deep-seated notions related to gender-based violence or domestic violence, which was still fairly high. And that we need to pay more attention to teacher training and advocacy focused more on the non-believers rather than people who are already converted. That's the last slide. And as we think about sustainability and scaling up, we need to have ongoing political engagement. The work that we do has to be in tandem with the current discourse and educational reforms if we have to be meaningful to the education system. And in order to institutionalize any intervention, I think the way to go is to integrate it in the curriculum. Otherwise, they will stay as standalone programs that will do well for a particular amount of time. And as the project ends, the program and initiative will also die out. And as I said earlier, sensitization of officials, creating a critical mass of trained functionaries, and supportive supervision, monitoring, and assessment. Thank you.
Jaya, thank you very much for that. I think that you raised some critical points, both which we'll come back to in the discussion, both the question of the demographic dividend, if you like, how we can capitalize on the fact that we have this growing cohort of adolescents and that the dependency gap now is going to be narrowed. There are going to be more people growing up and working and less people depending on them, which is potentially a very enabling resource. And I think the point you also made about participation is critical. We haven't maybe spoken enough about participation of young people, for young people, their own agency, their ideas and their challenges to what some of us may think. So I think that's something also we'll come back to, but I'm very grateful to you for raising it. And then I think the last point you made, which relates to some earlier points made yesterday and also maybe this morning, including by Dan, is this whole question of how we can use web-based technology, whether we're talking about what was it, the teaching wall, or whether we're talking about using GPS to track high-risk cases, or whether we're talking about different web-based mechanisms for supporting teachers, particularly if training is not a one-off, but it's an ongoing process. So these are all, I think, terrific ideas, which will, I'm sure, have repercussions for the other speakers. So thank you very much. Our second speaker sitting to my immediate left is Elizabeth Mehta, who is a teacher with a long history of working, I think, at just about every level of the educational system. But she's on this panel primarily because she founded an extraordinary nonprofit called Muktangan, which I hope she's going to talk about for those of you who haven't already heard about its work. But it really is an exemplar, the sort of innovation in thinking about curriculum and thinking about schools that we hope to foster. So Liz, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I don't want to say too much about Muktangan, but just a little bit of background. I've worked in India for 45 years, and as Dr. Baba said, at every level in the educational system. And the last 20 years, more than 20 years, have been in the mainstream with the Aga Khan network for 12 years. But 10 years ago, I reached a point of dissatisfaction because I felt the key issue, and it's very relevant to the topic today, was not being adequately addressed in educational development, and that is a relationship between the teacher and the child, that meaningful relationship, and the pedagogy. Now, it was not a conscious decision, but because I'd worked in traditional schools earlier, and I realized there were difficulties in the type of teacher education that was being transacted, I wanted a greenfield project. And who could be more open than the local women from marginalized communities? So it has become a community-based project in Mumbai, a strong partnership with the municipality. We have an integrated teacher education program that is integrated into the running of 7 municipal schools. We develop the community women. The faculty is a mixture of the community women themselves and more traditionally highly educated women with expertise in different areas. And once the trained pre-service is over, they work in the schools, and we have a very, very strong in-service professional development program for which we as faculty are learning. It is pure action research. Now, this whole topic, and I was interested in what Jaya just said about the students saying, the teacher is the best person to transact a program. I'd like to go one step earlier. I agree with that. But people say, when should the intervention start? And I was a little surprised, adolescent education. Sexuality starts at birth. And where does a child develop his concepts of sexuality, gender, etc.? It begins in the home with the parents. The teacher's own concepts of our own sexuality get transmitted willy-nilly. And the media in this modern age. So, this is a situation. And when you ask when should the intervention take place, begin, I would say it never begins. It's there already. It's a formative development process that starts from the very beginning. And young children are constantly, and Jay also referred to the principles, for instance, the principles of the National Curriculum Framework. Children are really working out for themselves their own understanding. Now, if this is going to happen, and I say this based on experience, teacher education needs to change in its process. If the teachers are going to, first of all the myths that are lying with teachers when they enter the training, they've also got to be taken through a whole lot of dialogue concerning their own perceptions of sexuality. It's very important. And their interactions with parents. I, in my earlier years, attended parent-teacher meetings where young women were giving lectures to parents on sexuality. Now, it doesn't work like that. You've got to facilitate the development of teachers who can support children in this exploration. And I think we're fortunate. People will raise a question of scalability. It is a model we're creating, but because we are a community, we can have a lot of this interaction. Now, how can you develop that sense of community on a larger scale? And whatever processes you develop, once again, Jay mentioned the question box, which is very, very useful. I've done it myself over the years. Just got the kids together and said, look, you can ask me any question you want, and I will answer it. There's just one thing. Any giggling, you will leave the room. And it is absolutely amazing the kind of questions that children ask. And through asking their own questions, they are educating themselves. But in order for regular classroom teachers to do this, teacher education needs to change. I had one or two other questions also. Traditionally, our educational system, and I say our, please give me that courtesy. I've worked in India 45 years in education, concentrates 95% on cognitive outcomes. The whole area of emotional development of children is neglected. And only this year in Muktangan, we've set up a special department because we ourselves were becoming guilty of that. A socio-emotional department which would concentrate and become an integrating force in the whole organization, our network of schools and everything. Emotional development needs to get into curriculum and become a focus. I have a couple of other questions which have always bothered me as an educationist. Maximum change comes in children during puberty. And there's a lot of stress on children, say between the ages of 13 and 16. And look at the other stress we're creating for children simultaneously. Board exams, academic stress. It's a major factor. And one wonders why boys become violent, sexually violent. Maybe some of the answers lie there. Urban areas, most schools are in a shift system. if you look at the load of subjects, 3 languages, science, history, geography, economics, social service, personality development, PE, computers, it can only be integrated into the regular subjects. Time is required for this. I would love to give you a few anecdotes because I have a passion for children, the kind of questions they ask. A married teacher comes back from a honeymoon. A preschool teacher says, "Are you pregnant? You've just got married." 101 little questions that children ask. Can we equip our teachers with the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, the values to deal and answer these questions and not overload the children with information? Respond to the children's desire to fill in the gaps in their own understanding. Answer their questions. And it leads in to this whole program related to sexuality. Thank you.
Liz, thank you so much for those wise and thought-provoking comments. Let me just highlight a couple. Firstly, the question of emotional development and the idea that this is a life journey. And I'm so glad you said that, because I felt that part of our discussion over the last 12 hours or whatever it's been has been somewhat partial in our kind of blaming and shaming agenda. Not that I don't understand the reasons why one feels a very strong sense of anger about violence committed by people who are supposed to be in authority, and not that I don't understand the frustrations of working for decades in a system that doesn't seem to improve. But at the end of the day, it is about creating opportunities for the next generation to learn and to be less brutal, rather than simply replacing one cast of bad players with another cast of bad players. And I think that the education system and the nurturing of emotion and the legitimacy of emotion, of doubt, is something we don't do enough of. So I'm so glad you raised that. And I think related to that, the point that both Jaya and you made about critical thinking and the importance of critical thinking and agency rather than just data and cognitive sort of like offloading is again something that we need to take stock of. The second very, I think, important issue that you raised, and it's something I hope we'll come back to in the discussion, is the question of the community development and the community location of your program, the fact that you have teachers drawn from the same constituency as the children. And I think certainly in the work that we've done over the years, that seems to me to be an extremely important issue, because the power hierarchy, whether it's a caste or a race or a class hierarchy that is often displayed in the education system, replicates some of the evils of the outside world in terms of inequality and status. And so I think the idea that teachers, who are power brokers, of course, in a school, come from the same community as the children, maybe even from the same families as the children, is hugely significant, hugely important, and it also creates role models, gender models, which can change the way that young people think. If the only female role model that they have close to home is a mother who is maybe being subjected to violence, then that's not going to do half as much for a child's emotional development as having a teacher from the same community who is respected and is the voice of authority. So I'm so glad you raised those points, and we'll come back to maybe some of your other points related to stress and puberty and the demands we place on adolescents in a few minutes when we turn to the discussion. But for now, let me introduce our third speaker, who is Dr. Saroj Yadav. She's a professor in the Department of Social Science, and she's a specialist also in adolescent education. But she's also involved with the NCERT, the National what does it stand for? Thank you, National Council for Education Research. And she is an expert and has done a lot of work on issues of curriculum. And so I think that we're very lucky to have her to be our final panelist today. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Yadav.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm not an expert, but I'm working in NCERT. And I think, you know, NCERT is an apex organization in the area of school education. And as the problem raised by Ms. Elizabeth is that the school education is going ahead, whereas the teacher education is not moving at that level. That is the problem is created because the teacher education is moving at a little, you can say, slower speed. So this NCERT basically has revised national curriculum framework number of times. And gender, because the national policy on education in one of the 10 core area is the, you can say, removal of sexual biases, sex biases. So that is a core area. While developing any material, we have to take into consideration the promotion of gender. No biases should be there, gender equity and equality and empowerment of women. So that is from even 1986 policy has already made it mandatory for the school curriculum to be included in that textbook or any other material. Secondly, as a follow-up, the latest National Curriculum Framework 2005, I think that framework has focused more on process aspects. If you see the textbook, I'll see some of the slides because my work has been made easier by both of the speakers. One has already given the what adolescence education program is. So what we are doing that the whole aspect of process has been included because there are a certain guiding principle of that national curriculum framework. And the one of the principle is that connecting students and the school to outside the school system. That is very, very important. What is happening into the outside the world, that should be connected to the school system. So they must learn, they must analyze. And secondly, the national curriculum framework focuses on critical pedagogy. Don't accept anything, whatever is given, whatever is shown to you, but you critically analyze. You take your own decision. And that through activities, or you can say case studies, or through projects. So that opportunities are being provided in the textbooks so that they can critically analyze all these issues. Now, so far gender is concerned, because as Dr. Jaya has already said, there are 3 programs are going on. Besides the textbooks, what NCERT is doing, these 3 programs, the one of the program, Dr. Jaya has already discussed in detail, and some of the issues of National Population Education Project. That project was initiated in long back in 1980 with the help of UNFPA. And at present, that project has 6 major themes. 2 themes, though almost all themes, when we talk about sustainable development, we cannot ignore gender. We cannot ignore empowerment of women, because women is 50% of women. If they are not contributing to the economy, then definitely economic growth will not take place. But specifically 2 areas, that is, one is gender equity and equality and empowerment of women, and secondly is adolescent reproductive and sexual health. So 2 areas are a part of National Population Education Project. So that project has been given importance in the National Curriculum Framework. Means the adolescence education concerns have been included in the framework document, and that was for the first time that 1.5 page has been given to this concern. Secondly, under this project, number of activities are included, and I think there are 2 objectives, as she has said. One is because we cannot have adolescence or gender as an independent subject area, and that will not serve the purpose also. We have to include everywhere, wherever feasibility is there, we have to become a part and parcel of the system. So for that system, we are trying to integrate into the textbooks. And there are number of textbooks where you will see that lessons are there. For example, what is boys and girls, how they develop both. That itself is given. In class 8 textbook, there is a adolescence, growing up as adolescents. That chapter is given. In social and political life also we have included. I'll show some of it there. So the first is integration into the syllabi and textbook of school education as well as teacher education. In some of the teacher education at the, you can say, D.Ed level, they have already started this as a optional course adolescence education and population education as an optional course at the means where the teachers are becoming as a primary school teachers. So that has already been included in some of the diet. I think almost all of you are aware, District Institute of Educational Training. So they have already started courses on population education and adolescence education. Then the second objective is, because many a time, as she has rightly said, the teachers are not that trained. The textbooks are process oriented, but the teachers are not so trained that they can take the process. You can say almost all the teachers, because we have in-service, pre-service. Pre-service is a minuscule, but in-service is a large, huge amount. We have more than 7 million teachers. So training these teachers once itself is a huge task. So what we did integrated, but suppose those teachers are not teaching the content which is included in the textbook. So we take the help of activities. That there are events, there are days, there are months where some activities can be organized. And therefore we started some activities that the students will organize activities focusing on gender, focusing on healthy relationship during adolescence, focusing on HIV/AIDS, focusing on, you can say, prevention of substance abuse. So those activities have been taken care. So like that, the two major focuses, one is integration into the school curriculum, syllabi and textbook, and secondly is the organization of co-curricular activities. But for both of them, we need teachers trained. And with the help of UNPA in some of the CBSE, KVS and NVS school, we have already trained 2 teachers per school. Now we are going to have more teachers. Rather, we have adopted a strategy that will train master trainers, and those master trainers will train nodal teachers, and nodal teachers will organize training program in their own schools. So in a way, 100% training at least in these schools will be there. In a state-run school, because the number is very huge, so some effort have been made that whatever in-service training program is going on, for example, there are 21 training program under SSA or under RMSA, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. So why not to give 1 module or 2 module on those training program? And NCERT has agreed that at least 2 days will be given to RMSA, and they have already included in that module that on adolescence issues, gender is already a part of it, but on other adolescence issues will also be there in the in that module for RMSF, that is for secondary and higher secondary school education. So these training of teachers are very, very important. And we are also thinking, though on a very small scale, counseling, which Dr. Jaya, I think, have left it, because through UNFPA we are training nurses as counselor. In Navodaya Vidyalayas, Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas, every school has a nurse. So why not to train those nurses as counselors? We are also planning at the NCERT level that to develop a module on counseling to make teacher as a counselor. Because there's no need, almost you can say 100% students do not require rigorous counseling. Group counseling activities can be organized, and if there is a case, then referral services may be, you can say, used for those peculiar cases. But to train teacher as a counselor is also in the process. Peer education, because ultimately, as they are saying, peer are more closer to them. So on a smaller scale, she has the material also that how to train peer educators. So 4 students, boys and girls from secondary level will be trained as peer educators, but they will not independently have training program with the students, but they will help the teachers to begin with, so that the teacher will be facilitated to organize the activities into the school system. Advocacy definitely very important, because when we started NCERT, because this program, adolescence education program, was initiated in 1993. And we started on a smaller scale, but we said we must have an advocacy of parents and community leaders. Because the moment you say the word sex, they will say something is wrong is going on in the school. Even the teachers were saying that we will not say word HIV. We will not say the word sex. Because later on students will say, "Are wo sex teacher aa rahi hai. Are wo HIV teacher aa rahi hai." So they'll say that we will not say that. But now I think the system, at least that change has occurred. The teachers who are teaching this, that teacher is more favorable than the other teachers. Because as she has rightly said, the emotional, you can say, development is more important. Even IIT students are committing suicide. So intellectually they are very strong, but emotionally they are not. So therefore we are focusing, and in the NCF also says that emotional development, the social relationship with peers. So it's not only, that's why we are not calling it adolescent education, we are calling it adolescence education. We have to equip the parents, the community, the media also, because in 2007, it is nobody but the media has created the issue more, you can say, burning issue. So the media should be a part of it. The parents should be a part of it, because something, even the parents do not understand why the child is behaving like this and what are the actions required on their part. So advocacy at all level is also very, very important. And even advocacy of principles. Whatever, you can say, expert the teacher is, but if the principal is not giving the space and the time and the, you can say, motivation, the teacher will not do anything into the classroom situation. Then we have the activities also. I think now we can say 2, 3. This is the number of teachers, school, and you can say students. India is a huge number, and you can say reaching to them is a huge task, but that we cannot say as an excuse that because huge, so we should not do anything. Next, you can just, I'll show you some of the activities. So we organized, we thought many people at the policy level used to say, because even Dr. Jaya said 23 hours. And day before yesterday, there was a meeting in the planning commission, they said 23 hours? In one day, even less than one day. It is not 24 hours or even. So just one day you are struggling for that. So we said 23 hours means 23 sessions. And 23 sessions means that maybe 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hours. But even if they are able to provide us the space in the curriculum for 23 hours, that itself will make a difference. Next. I would like to, so we thought that training teachers, whether the teachers are organizing activities or not into the school system, and I think the activities are life skill based activities. So we directly started certain competitions. Next. एक photo है, वो just one photo is there. Yeah, these are the, you can say, for example, these are the areas, as I said, gender equity and equality and for stabilization of population. So that was in that context, but and adolescents also include many things. Next. So these are the lessons. Already we did a content analysis of different states. How many lessons related to gender, related to HIV, AIDS, drug abuse, and you can say process of growing up has been included in various textbooks of different states and union territories. Next. See, this is, for example, I just have one example of how much we have integrated to some extent the gender issues. For at the upper primary stage in class 6, we have a social and political life for one. And on page 53, we have a poem on dowry. So how to, you can say, how to remove that dowry, how to make the children aware about the bad effects of dowry. Then Hindu Succession Act has also been included on page 54. In social and political life, growing up as boys and girls, women changes the world. So it's a full chapter on, you can say, growing up as boys and girls. Similarly, on page 64, there's a Domestic Violence Act, sexual harassment, dowry, etc. has been dealt. Trafficking has been dealt, and in class 7 also, class 8 also. In class 10 also, in democratic politics, there is a content related to gender has already been taken care, because this is a part of our policy document. Next. That she has already explained. Yeah, before that, yeah, earlier, yeah. So we organize number of activities in the country, because we were implementing at that time also in 30 states and union territories, almost all states, only few states like Meghalaya, Lakshadweep, which were smaller states, and 3 states which were later carved out. So these 5 states are not at present. Painting competition focusing on various population and gender issues. Similarly, essay competition, quiz competition, national role play and folk dance for the last 3 years we are organizing. And I can show some of the photographs next. इससे पहले. These are the themes which we have circulated, and these competitions started from the school to the district to the block, districts, state, and those who are winning at the state level, they reach to the regional level and national level. We made a competition because our objective was not a competition. But because of the competition, it gives little motivation, because we are giving certificates, we are giving some prizes. So large number of students participated in this. And I think we have the videos, which with the help of UNFPA, we are going to convert into a teaching learning videos. So in 2009-10, 250 district students participated, not 100%, but at least students from 250 districts participated. Similarly, in 2010 and 11, we have large number of students. Next. These are some of the you can say, pictures of those students at the national level. So I think I'll just wind up. And already we have that electronic discussion forum. She has already said that that should be widely used, because reaching to the huge number is a huge task for the NCERT. So that's all what we are doing in this regard. Thank you.
Dr. Yella, thank you very much for that really very interesting overview. And I think it's, for some of us, very nice to see the actual curriculum on the screen and get a sense of what's actually being covered. Also, I'm very glad that you mentioned, albeit in passing, the issue of suicide. I'm not sure everybody in the room knows that suicide peaks in adolescence, of course, and it's actually a major precipitator of death. So it's a huge mortality factor. So when we're thinking about stress and we're thinking about the coming together of physical changes and psychological changes, as well as the demands of transitioning into adulthood, whether it's early marriage and childbearing, or whether it's skill training and finding a job and supporting your family, or whether it's just performing up to the standard expected by your peers in terms of your sexual prowess or your machoism or whatever. This is an extraordinarily stressful and complicated period, which we really do need to think about carefully. So I said I would get back to the panel, but I think what I'm going to do is just raise a couple of questions and then open it to the floor, but invite the panelists to also just jump in and put their hands up if they want to say something. The questions I have for all of us are just a couple. The first is, how can we increase access to adolescent education, sex education, from 15%, which I think is the figure that you mentioned, Jaya? That's a tiny figure, and we've heard how the political backlash against sexual education is still so strong, how only 6 years ago, sex education was completely closed down in some states, and how you still hear about prominent politicians equating sexual education with sexual license. So how can we change that? What needs to happen for the tide to somehow turn? Secondly, the question of violence, and actually nobody raised this, but violence is pervasive in school. Violence, corporal punishment by teachers, is an enormous issue globally, including in India. Not long ago, there was this case of a child who died because his head was banged against the wall by a teacher in a rage. And children regularly complain of being beaten if they don't give the right answer. So the kind of use of corporal punishments in school, I think, is something which completely undermines the atmosphere of trust and confidence that we need to facilitate learning and emotional development. So I wondered if people have ideas about that, and perhaps there are some concrete moves afoot. But it always shocks me when I interview students, as I do quite a lot in India, just to hear how much it's a common fact that children are getting beaten by their teachers. Seems to be completely accepted. And then thirdly, I wanted to raise the question of counselling, and to ask what the resources for teacher counselling are, because I know there's research in the States, and this is maybe, again, one of our hopes for this conference, is that we bring experiences from different countries to learn from each other. And Diane was mentioning some of the issues related to the States this morning. I know that in the States, teacher depression is an enormous problem. And so it's not just that teachers are, as often claimed, absentees, that teachers are negligent, that teachers are selling their jobs, that teachers are taking their positions of responsibility for granted. It's also that it is an extraordinarily tough job. I mean, I cannot frankly think of anything worse than spending my day in a classroom of adolescents, having brought up my own three. It's very tough. So I just wondered what the resources for teachers' support are. What possibilities do teachers have to kind of honestly talk about their own weaknesses and their own issues, psychological and otherwise? Those are some of the questions I have, but let's now use the last minutes we have to hear, and if people could please introduce themselves when they speak. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. And please use the mic. Introduce yourself first.
I am Nitin. I am working for an organization that works with female fetus. About sexuality from the movies, there was a hero, a male lead in the movies, and there was a female lead, hero or heroine as we call them, and there was some sexual chemistry between them and some romance between them. Now the world has changed. A 7-year-old, a 10-year-old boy knows what is gang rape, what is homosexuality, pedophilia, and then there are pornography, and there's no end to what happens in those things. And the understanding of normality, normal sex, has gone like millions miles ahead from how it was just 15 years ago when I was in school. So the thing is that have been integrated in the NCERT curriculum and etc. other actions that have been taken. Is it going to do anything about these new understanding of sex this new generation is getting now?
Thank you. We'll take 3 questions, and then we'll give the panelists a chance to reply. So, second question and third question. Yeah.
I have a quick comment and a suggestion. Firstly, I just want to quickly take on the point that Elizabeth mentioned about sexuality developing at birth. Now, I think that's a really important point because the moment a child is born to parents, the first question they ask the doctors is about whether the child is a boy or a girl. And if it's neither, if it cannot be decided, then the whole of medical industry is actually geared towards creating 2 genders. So we put the bodies through operations and things like that, and throughout their lives, the child is actually struggling to be either male or female. And while we did talk about deconstructing role play and gender stereotypes, we did not talk about really deconstructing body stereotypes and what a woman should really look like. So I think that should be integrated into the course. The other suggestion was about the outreach program. So you mentioned about how you've reached on to a lot of regional schemes and government policies. Now, one idea that I had was the midday meal scheme that the governments are running. Now, these are actually a really good way of countering certain kinds of biases in our society. So, for instance, a midday meal scheme operates in a school and they give children food. And because they give them a meal in a day, a lot of students are incentivized to go to school. Now, things which are caste issues, for instance, interdining is fairly stigmatized in certain parts of India. Now that is overcome because these kids are served together. So in a policy, like a supplementary policy to that could be that while you're deconstructing caste, you also deconstruct gender and you sort of ally with these government schemes which have which have a good outreach. So you'd be able to ally with a lot of them and reach out to rural parts of India and a lot of schools. And the last suggestion I had was for Ms. Yadav and about how we spoke about Hindu Succession Act and a lot of personal law and a lot of law basically being integrated in civic syllabus for students. Now, the problem that we sometimes struggle with is that usually the majority community tends to define what's the national law. Now, if this, I think, would be slightly alienating to people coming from different communities who do not apply to, for instance, something for whom the Hindu Marriage Act or the Successions Act doesn't apply. So it would probably be a good idea to integrate different regional diversity in terms of law and religion. Thank you.
In fact, Ms. Bhava, you raised the issues of how evils, what is prevailing outside, they enter into the school. And the lady just spoke about the midday meal schemes just to retain the students so that there are not large dropouts. But still you find in parts of India that, in fact, the government has made provisions that the cooking should be by the Dalit women. But there have been cases where students refuse to eat food. Now, they are school kids, they are in class 1, class 2, class 3. These are widely reported by the press and the television. It has been reported that they refuse to eat food. Just look at a child. At such a young age, he has this kind of an impression. So still your kind of a traditional mode of interaction between the teacher and students and between students is still governed by the old power structure. So I don't know how much in the social and political curriculum which you, Ms. Yadav, just you presented, it was a beautiful presentation, that how far have you addressed the issues of power imbalances between religion, Hindu and Muslim issues? Because it's not homogeneous, the gender. The woman is not homogeneous structure. There's a Dalit woman, there's upper caste woman, there's a Sikh woman, a Muslim woman. So the power imbalances, have they been addressed between rural and urban, caste and religion? Thank you.
Great questions. So how should we proceed? Let's start with Jaya and go. I know we had 3 questions, so now we'll have 3 answers, and then we'll have the next round.
I don't think there are absolutely clear answers. I think schools are mirroring what is happening in the society. So while we look at school as a laboratories to actually bring about transformation, and for that there has to be work at several planks, as has been said. So for example, what you asked, how does the school, the understanding of sexuality stay current? I don't think it's the content that we need to talk about. What we need to talk about is respect for sexual diversity. Once children understand that better, they understand the issue of discrimination and are able to challenge that, then I don't think it's so much about the content can always be obtained from the internet. So I don't think we're looking so much at content. And that the program has to be dynamic. We cannot have a curriculum that stays for a decade, which will still serve the needs of young people. In terms of talking about body image, I think that's part of the curriculum already. Just quickly, how do you increase access to sex education? I think we're changing every year. The data is from 2006-07, and I think what has happened in the past 6 or 7 years has actually brought the need for sexuality education to become part of school education. What Dr. Yadav was saying, that the Planning Commission is not willing to give us 23 hours. Also, we have to be creative in how we demand time from school. So there are several existing opportunities for learning. Like we said, that there are the curriculum itself, the training of teachers, the existing school assembly forums, things like midday meal, where you're not even saying that you're actually breaking the caste barrier, but it is being broken. There will be issues of some resistance, but they won't be universal. In terms of violence being pervasive and how do we respond to that, I think it's a long road ahead. There won't be any quick fixes to this, but yes, orienting teachers to it, orienting students, letting parents know that their children should not be hit, they should also not be doing it at home, and also having it as part of teacher review. Teacher performance is reviewed. If some of the reviews take into account these instances and say that the school has a zero tolerance policy towards violence, and those teachers are recognized in some way. In terms of counseling, yes, it's the ideal to have a counselor in every school, but we are still very far from that reality. We've worked with training both teachers and staff nurses as counselors. What we've found lacking is that when these teachers go back, the system isn't supporting them to function as counselors. They have the same teaching load, and with that, they are asked to also provide counseling services. That's not going to work. But we need to find a midway between having a full-time counselor and no counseling services. So if a couple of hours to a teacher is given in a week, where somebody who's been trained and they need to be supported. And so things like electronic discussion forums that Dr. Yadav alluded to, where teachers can come over, discuss some of their questions, and we understand not everyone accesses internet, but at least those who do, they can form a community where they can dialogue. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And Liz, yeah, and you don't have to answer all the questions. Just pick maybe one that you feel particularly strongly about, or you have something particular to say, so we have another couple of rounds of questions. Thank you.
Issue also that when you are a community like we are, the teachers, many of them are the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the neighbours. Whatever you're doing in the school, the forums, the discussions, all automatically get transferred back into the community. And there's a very strong bonding. Now, I think in a way, it's been brought up in government reports, but the implementation has not gone ahead. It has got tremendous transformational possibilities. As far as this violence issue is concerned, we are working in municipal schools. And in the same building, there are the regular municipal schools. And I have been witness to, day after day, hearing whack and wails, pitiful wails. It is a major problem, and I do not blame the teachers. I think we really do need to look at the empowerment of the teacher. The National Policy in Education, I think it was the 90s, I've lost all track of the 86, that's it, did stress the teacher should be centre of the stage. But unfortunately, it's not happened. In fact, very little time of the teacher in the classroom is spent on instruction in a government school. A lot of the time, and we talk about free midday meals, in Mumbai, we have about 24 items that are given free to the children. But everything has to be documented and signed for. Format filling. Where is the time of that poor teacher? That is a teacher stress that leads to the violence.
Of the questions have already been answered. So one is that now those states which were not implementing adolescence education program, they are implementing but in a different name. For example, may not be calling adolescence education, but NPP, under NPP they changed it to health education. For example, Rajasthan, they are calling it life skill education. So they have changed. Madhya Pradesh is doing a role play and folk dance competition. So that way they have already initiated the process. Secondly, I said 23 hours because the planning commission says it's too less. Yeah, it should be enhanced. 23 hours is very less, it should be enhanced, but how far we are able to find out the, you can say in the school curriculum. And I'll place before you, because for NCERT, since it is developing textbooks and how far we have reached, once it is a part of curriculum, we can say 100% we have reached to the students because they have to read the textbook. But secondly, problem is that in NCERT, adolescence education is one area. Every day we are getting a message that this lesson on road safety should be included from class 1 to class 10. This lesson on army, because this should be from class 1 to class 10. This lesson on this. So it's a very, and on the one side we are saying a curriculum load, on the other side everybody and the ministry and those who are powerful, they are saying no, we have to have that lesson. So that's why at least the MHRD, the Government of India, the NCERT has realized the importance of adolescence because of this emotional, because even NCF also says emotional quotient. Not only intellectual, but emotionally we have to be strong. Socially we have to be strong. So at least that has given a space, and that has given a space in the curriculum. The process part is definitely, because you say Hindu Act, it's not a content area. These are activities where they will say, are you remembering some other act related to other religion? So let's discuss. Similarly about, there is a case study. If somebody is preparing midday meal, how do you think he or she should not prepare? Why not? So we have given questions. We have in-text questions, and rather we have given 2 characters. Those characters, if you see the textbook, they are asking questions again and again in the textbook, just for reflective thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So actually, we're already 5 minutes beyond the time. So I think I'm going to go back on my earlier promise, and this is going to be the last round of questions, and then we'll close. So could I see 3 more questions? 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So starting with the lady at the back. Oh, the pink-shirted person. Okay. Well, we'll make 3 into 4. Okay.
My name is Eliza, and I work for Council to Secure Justice. We work on the issues of child sexual violence. My question or my suggestions is to Professor Yadav. Well, we've talked about the emotional balance. We've talked about the developing of social skills and the intelligence skills. I think at the end of the day, the violence that we see that is happening to our children and to our women, if we really teach our child right from the beginning the core value of life, what is that core value of life that we want to, to let our children respect any human as human, not because it's she, not because it's he. So that's something that probably the NCERT may want to be thinking about, including it in the curriculum. I come from a Northeastern community, and I saw that, the curriculum that you have included. But India is unity in diversity. And for example, I did my graduation in Delhi University. I face a lot of discrimination being a woman, coming from a Northeastern community. People calling as, with names like Chinese, like Chinkies. And what's that? That's the discrimination I have to face as a student. Even as a lawyer, if I go into a courtroom, people will say, Jo Chinese lawyer, Nepali lawyer, aa gaye. And I think that's something that NCERT, right from the beginning, with our own mainlanders, brothers and sisters, at the student level, okay, we do have an Indian brothers and sisters who have different features. And I would expect that my mainlander brothers and sisters to respect my identity and my differerences. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for raising the question of diversity, which is, of course, runs through everything I think we are talking about. We haven't talked about sexual diversity so much or homosexuality, but of course these issues are central. So thank you for raising it. Yeah, lady over here.
My name is Shalini Mittal, and I'm a corporate trainer and part of the active civil society, let's put it, who want to pitch in and who want to make a difference. My question is related to the indirect sexual education that the child absorbs through the entire growing up period. One is, yes, you've got specific chapters that you put in which relate to gender sensitization and sexual education. And Dr. Pooja, you mentioned that you've changed your exercises to be more gender sensitive. But what about the texts and the stories that are exposed to which portray women as a weak, helpless, bechari, vidwa, budima? These kind of portrayals, they really leave the child very confused. The second influence that they have is our popular media. While you're telling them something in your textbooks, the popular media shows a macho man who has his, who has to do all the violent stuff, and with women and the kind of music that's around. How does the education system deal with negating the influence of that negative message that they're getting from popular media? Is that being handled?
Thank you very much, actually. Excellent points. So thank you for them. So the third question was gentleman over there and then the lady in pink. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Baba. I have a question for Dr. Yadav. Is that when you're looking for teachers to be counselors, is there any evaluation or an assessment of the teacher, carried out to see whether they would become effective counselors or not? Because in a lot of cases, teaching and instruction go hand in hand, which is really one-way communication. And counseling means a lot of listening. And they're brilliant academicians here, and they listen. But a lot of people that we've come across don't, especially if I go back to my own childhood. So do you, the whole question of, in fact, even since morning and yesterday, training people, can you really train a person that doesn't have the aptitude to be trained in that particular area? That's a question for you. And I think the other comment is on the emotional quotient. And studies have shown that children over the years after they passed out from school or college that had higher levels of IQ didn't do as well as children that had higher levels of EQ. Because the IQ doesn't teach you to deal with the loss of a loved one or death or, separation. It doesn't teach you all that. And there's not been enough work. And Elizabeth, a lot of credit to you here for instituting this process of emotional development, because that's really fundamental to a human. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, last point.
Hi, my name is Ritu Jain, and I'm a dance movement therapist, a CPA, and a social activist / worker.
What's CPA?
Chartered accountant, but licensed in the United States. Thank you. So as we discuss emotional, psychological, social, physical well-being, and practices that are going to create open dialogue, that are safe spaces for students to speak up. Why haven't we thought about, mediums such as art therapy, dance movement therapy, music therapy, things like that, where we actually can make it less controversial, unabrasive, and less overwhelming for students? They will feel, they'll have a place to be more expressive and show exactly where they're coming from. And, they've been proven to be very effective. So, I think this is something creative and innovative that we need to think about in this country.
Thank you so much. Just goes to show you should always break every rule. That was a great comment. So I'm glad we went from 3 to 4. Okay, so this is the final round, and let's. Why don't we start from the left this time? So if Dr. Yadav doesn't mind starting, and
I
then
think,
and then Elizabeth Mehta, and then Dr. Jaya.
Yeah, there were three, I think, questions. One is about the Northeast, definitely, because things will change, will take a little time. But if you see the NCERT textbooks, we have taken care of that all regions should have a representation. And their issues and concerns should be made a part of the textbook. And nowhere in the textbook you used to write bichari, ladki, or I think that is the most important aspect, that while writing the books, all these biases should not be there. Even we do not show any picture where we show the women at a lower place and men at a higher place. So that thing we used to take into account. But practice, definitely, that will require a lot of things. Media, I think, plays a very important role, definitely. And therefore, that's why I'm saying this time the books have process. We have two characters. These characters used to ask questions. You are saying this, but the media is saying something different. So that discussion among the students will take place. So if you see the books, you will find out that there are two characters in most of the books, and those two characters used to ask in-text questions to clarify things. And that effort has already been made. Teacher as a counselor, we have started it. It's on an experimental basis. Though NCERT used to have a counseling and guidance program for teachers, but the problem is with the school system that those who have been trained as a counselor, later on they are not giving opportunities to do counseling. So we said at least those who have been trained and those we can train under this program, at least will able to change their mindset. If they are able to listen, even listening itself will solve most of the problem of the student, because majority of the students have issues which can be sorted out even at the by the behavior of the teachers. So that we have already initiated. But in Navodaya Vidyalaya, as under UNFPA project, we has already evaluated, I think Dr. Jaya will help us, evaluated that nurses, how far they are able to help the students in sorting out some of their issues and concerns. Thank you.
May I say something, Dr.
You know what? I'm going to cut you off because we're running out of time.
Yeah. But in response to the last comment about creativity, we have just actually realized that we need to bring together the creative expression in all our different departments. And we set up a weekly creative expression group, which is made up of faculty from language, from the library, from computers, from art, from music, and they're all getting together for precisely this reason. It's going to help not only the emotional development of the children, but also for the organization as a whole. And we as faculty, our teacher trainers, our teachers, and the children. I just wanted to mention, we talk about gender in textbooks, but just an interesting comment. I was talking to somebody, one of the faculty, and she said it's strange. In the preschool, we have a lovely home area in the preschool class with pans, etc. And the boys and girls play in that home area together, making biryani, feeding the dolls, boys and girls equally. By standard 1, the boys will not sit with the girls. The boys have become boisterous. And I was remembering how I used to get them to wash up their cups after the snack time. The boys didn't do it. The girls all did it. And they went to the girls, gave the cups to the girls, and the girls washed them for them. Where has this come from? 1 year earlier, there was no sign of this gender. Now, textbooks are not going to alter that. We need to work with parents, with family, with community.
We do not have results of a formal evaluation of a counseling program, but what I would say is selection criteria are very important. If all of us also went back to our own schooling years, there are always teachers. So in a staff of 20, 40, everyone may not be the listening kind of teacher or the popular one. But I think that is the role of a program like adolescence education, or when we select teachers as counselors, that we provide criteria and also give the rationale for why those attitudes and aptitudes are important, because those could be enhanced.
Thank you. I think it's a sign of a wonderful conference that here we are, at least half an hour, if not more, beyond our ending time, and we all still have lots to say. So I think that's a good omen for the future. I'm just going to say one last sentence before I hand over to my two colleagues to close. And my last sentence is that this is just a start. To quote Chief Justice Verma, we're just starting, and we hope that this, our first meeting of bringing our colleagues and our friends here together, is the start of a common journey. So as you leave, please, all of you, think how you would like to be part of what happens after this, because I think we all have a role, and it's great that there are people from the corporate sector and from other parts and from the creative world joining those of us who are more sort of predictable members of this discussion. So please think how you can be part of what we want to build. You know how to contact us, and we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you very much.
I'm making very, very brief comments. First of all, congratulations for making it through to the end of this conference. We couldn't have had such a great discussion without you, so we're very appreciative to each and every one of you for your contributions and your future contributions. When my colleague David Wilkins put me in touch with Gopal right when the Verma Committee was established, I jumped at the opportunity to do whatever we could, but we didn't really know what we could do. And then we formed this group with my colleagues Jackie and Mina, and then later Aparna, to figure out what we could do. So it's still an open question, but international attention and international law really make a difference. We should elevate the charter in the Verma Committee report to our new charter for a new nation that we're going to build together, where bonobos are in charge, where we explore the power and potential of female alliances. And this is a real moment. And one of the things that we wanted to do, and I think we are doing, is harnessing the energy of this social justice movement by continuing the conversation and by elevating the level of attention to it so that we can keep it on people's minds. And it is all over. This is a global problem. So we've been able to help because everything's pretty familiar to us. It might be, the prevalence and variation might be slightly different, but the problem is the same. And we think that we hope to be sharing these frameworks for new approaches and hearing from you about more innovation about how we can tackle this problem. I just want to say that I really appreciate the honesty and the courage of looking this problem in the face that we've seen in this room over the past 2 days. It's been really, really remarkable, and I really appreciate it. And I think that the only way that we're going to stop it is by taking on the really hard questions. So, so thank you so much.
Just as closing remarks, first I'd like to thank Jacqueline Baba, Diane Rosenfeld, the rest of our team, Meena Hewitt, Payal Narayan, Sabrin Chaudhary, and Amrita Arora, who's not here at the moment, for all their hard work, their positive spirit, their energy, traveling all the way from America to make this conference possible. And I know that, I think I can speak for all of us and say that we want this to be a continuing effort. We sincerely want to work towards reducing and hopefully one day eliminating gender violence in India. And certainly any comments and suggestions you may have, definitely please contact any of us by email and help us work towards progressing, going further with this agenda. And most importantly, thanks to all the audience for participating and making this possible. Thank you. there's also some tea and samosas in the pergola, so please join us.
Vote of thanks to the organizers.
Yes.